Well. Good afternoon, John. I'm okay. How are you? So, we are here this afternoon because the full judgment from one Alex Belfield, a fellow YouTuber, well, former fellow YouTuber at this point, I would say, who has just been sentenced. John, could you speak for a sec? 1 second. 1 second. It's, for some reason, it is not liking you, so let's try this one. Give us a...
He's been sentenced to 5 years and 26 weeks.
He has. Alex Belfield has been sentenced to 5 years and 26 weeks in prison, of which he will probably serve about half, and then the rest on probation/parole, for 2 counts of stalking and 2 counts of simple stalking. And there was a 5-week trial in Nottingham Crown Court, and Alex reported on it every single night himself. He reported on his own trial.
Yeah,
and I think
he made a few errors, didn't he?
I think he made a fair few errors. Now, I think we need to kind of pile through everything before we get to the judgment, and let people know from what we've worked out. And we're looking at this from an objective mindset, right? Because I really enjoyed a lot of the stuff that the Voice of Reason did. I really did. But we've got to look at this from an objective mindset, and let's do that and say, I don't quite understand. Well, I do understand, but many people don't understand where all the money went. So he's sent £300,000 to solicitors, or around that amount. Now, people seem to think that that was for this case, and from what I've worked out, it wasn't. It was never for this. It was for lawsuits that Alex was going to bring against people like Jeremy Vine, the BBC, the Nottingham Police, and others. It wasn't to defend this.
Civil lawsuits.
Yes. Civil lawsuits in court. And I'm trying to be objective here when I say that I think Alex purposely muddled the two together often. Because he would always say, I want my day in court. I want my day in Crown Court. I want to expose these people. But it's to me, it was always a muddle of the two, and it was intentional, right? You go, I want my day in court, I'm going to court, my door's been busted, I need to raise money for solicitors, I'm going to sue this person, I'm going to sue that person. And it all got lumped together.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that was on purpose.
Yeah.
This, that Alex Belfield has been sentenced for, was 8 criminal cases in one being brought against him from 8 individual people.
Yep.
All for online stalking. And actually, Alex has, and I don't have the full statement here, but he has now admitted to some of the things that he did wrong. And he's apologized. He said he's showing remorse.
Yeah, it's really easy to show remorse after you've been sentenced to 5.5 years. Is the remorse for the actions he took, or is the remorse that he got found guilty?
Well, this is the question, isn't it? And once again, we have to have our objective hats on and say, did Alex do anything wrong? And in my view, he definitely did something wrong, right? Yeah. Now, does that mean he should have 5.5 years in prison? Now, I didn't say that.
It seems excessive on the face of it.
It does, but should we have a look through? Should we go through the judgment? Should we? This is what we're here for. Should we go through the judgment from Justice Saini and try and work out what has been done to cause this sentence? Okay, so in the Crown Court at Nottingham, Friday 16th of September, that's the Friday just past, 2022, RV Alex Belfield.
And we should point out that they're only at the Crown Court jury trial because Alex elected for that. He wanted that. He could have gone to just a judge, yeah?
Magistrates.
Magistrates court, in which case any potential penalty would be lesser than what could be handed out by a Crown Court. As you go further up the scale in the court system, the penalties get the risk is bigger.
Absolutely. and he represented himself. In fact, Justice Saini at the beginning of the trial said to him, you need to have some kind of representation, and provided him state-funded representation, a state-funded barrister. So it doesn't, a lot of this doesn't make a lot of sense when you look at it from Alex's point of view. I mean, I think before we get into this, I think YouTube played a massive part in this. And I think
I think Alex's head played a massive part in this.
This is why I think YouTube played a massive part in this, because YouTube algorithms, and we've been trying to study them quite heavily recently, pump videos out to an audience. Yeah. And it pumps videos out to an audience that watches videos quite like the ones that you've already done. And so all of these people subscribing to Alex, all of these people that are supporting Alex already agree with Alex before they get there. And YouTube...
And they love him.
And they love him.
I mean, your audience always loves you, and this is part of what I said in my opinion piece the other day. Your audience always loves you, and the problem is you won't get proper objective facts from your audience because they'll let you away with things. They'll let things slip. They'll want to believe.
But this is why
this applies to everyone, because this even applies to people that watch the BBC.
Applies to us too, right?
Yeah, but it applies to people that watch the BBC, especially over the last 3 years. They'll let them away with things that don't quite add up because we believe the BBC and we're your audience, you know? And yeah, it does apply to us, but you and I, Ben, take special care to never be, one, beholden to an audience, and two, to treat them as anything other than just regular people.
Yeah, because they are just regular people, right? And we want people from all political spectrums. We want people from all religions, faiths, backgrounds to come and enjoy what we do. They don't have to agree with us, but we'd like them to come and enjoy it.
Absolutely.
But the thing about Alex was and this is a bit of a criticism, because he painted a target on people. You know, the lefty liberal, namby-pamby, Guardian reading, champagne sipping, all of that stuff that he says, yeah?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
That alienates people. That alienates an audience. And we don't want to do that. We will take the piss out of people. We will take the piss out of work. But we'll say to them, come and join us. In fact, come and talk to us. We're quite happy for that as well.
Yep.
But he painted that target on people, and this is why I'm going to circle back to what I was saying about YouTube and the algorithm. It made him believe his own hype, and it put him into a 300,000 voice strong echo chamber of people saying, you can do this.
Yep.
And like you said, it made his ego inflate, it made his head inflate. We like it when people criticize us. We like it when people disagree with us, because sometimes if they've got a good point or they've got a good proof, we will change our minds. But unfortunately, Alex was painted into that corner, and he didn't help himself. And once again, I am not going to say that this man deserves 5.5 years in prison. But let's see what the judge said.
Yeah, let's see what the judge said, because it's very difficult to find... people have had less time in prison for serious assault.
Yes.
They've had less time in prison for paedophilia.
But this argument is moot, because I watched a video from Katie Hopkins today. Mm-hmm. Katie Hopkins has put out a video about it, and I watched what she said. And now I don't particularly agree with Katie Hopkins all of the time. She's fine, you know. She's not never done me any harm. Mm-hmm. In fact, I gave her a hug once, I think. But
I think she hugged you.
Yeah.
Right, enough. Stop dwelling. Come back.
But she said that, you know, each individual... The law is not the law, for one, because each individual case is presided on by a judge who makes his judgment at that time, in that circumstance, in that instance. And also, laws and precedent can be created to make examples of people.
Mm-hmm. Well, the law is never the law until it's been tested in court.
Absolutely. Shalini says she watched that Katie Hopkins video. She was spot on. Exactly. And it's nobody in the history of this country has ever been convicted of what Alex has, for the reasons that Alex has. He is a test case. And we've had this conversation in the background. We will get to the judgment in a minute, I promise. But we've had this conversation in the background because I think this could be a slippery slope precedent. John's not so much, but I think this could be the start of something that says, say they, not maybe us because we're small fish, but they start coming after people. They start coming after online content creators. And the envelope gets pushed and pushed and pushed and pushed. And then all of a sudden, nobody can say anything about anyone anywhere. And that worries me. And you don't think so much, do you, John?
Well, we need to hear the judgment. I've not heard the judgment. I've not read the judgment. But I think that it's a two-way street, because if you're going to do that, it's going to apply to both sides. And if it applies to both sides, then the lefties are going to get hammered more than the rights.
Well, I was going to say, actually, to a personal circumstance, to a personal situation, now can I go after all of the people that have done what they've done to me?
Well, exactly.
And to my family.
Exactly.
Under what has been done to Alex. You know, my wife has been terrified at times because they put our address all over the internet.
Yeah. So, yeah, and the thing is, I think you probably could, yeah.
But should
And that's why that depends how strongly you feel about it, because if your wife has been put into a state of fear and alarm, then a crime has been committed.
I believe,
it's as simple as that.
Yeah, but then I'm also a big proponent of we shouldn't be legislating against feelings.
No. This isn't just feelings, right? If you've been put into a state of fear and alarm, right, that is different from just being offended. If you're put into a state of fear and alarm, that is an actual crime.
Well, I mean, we've had direct threats. So we've had direct...
That's a crime.
I've had threats on my life. We've had threats on our home. So, yeah.
That's a crime.
Yeah. Okay.
It's a crime. Plain and simple, that's a crime.
Okay. But I don't know whether or not Belfield did that to people, and that's why we're going to go through the judgment. And we're going
Right, let's go through the judgment. Let's see.
So, sentencing remarks and judgment on the Crown's application under Section 5A of the Protection from Harassment Act 1997, the Honourable Mr. Justice Saini. Count 1. Mr. Belfield, on 5th of August 2022, following a 5-week trial here at Nottingham Crown Court, the jury convicted you on 4 counts. On count 5, you were convicted of stalking Mr. Bernard Spedding, known professionally as Bernie Keefe. I will refer to him by that name. The stalking of Mr. Keefe caused him serious alarm or distress. On count 5, you were convicted of stalking Ben Hewis, also causing him serious alarm or distress. On count 7, you were convicted of stalking Philip Dehaney. On count 8, you were convicted of stalking Jeremy Vine. Those two not including serious alarm or distress. Just Kate in the YouTube chat's made a good point. It would only affect the left equally if the law was applied equally, and that is a good point. It's a very good point. Justice is too in this country.
The thing is, if you start like that, you can't not apply it.
Yeah, no, I hear what you're saying. Counts 5 and 6 are the more serious form of aggravated stalking because they caused your victims serious alarm or distress. Count 7 and 8 reflect the less serious form of stalking under the law. But he never physically stalked these people, and I do have to say that. He never physically stalked these people.
Yeah, okay, but that's not something you can argue about unless you know the wording of the law.
Well, yes, you're absolutely right. It now falls to me to sentence you for these offences and to deal with the Crown's related application for restraining orders against you in relation to Mr. Keefe, Mr. Hewis, Mr. Dehaney and Mr. Vine. Those orders seek to prevent further harassment of these people. I will refer to these individuals collectively in my remarks as the complainants. At the end of my sentencing, I will also need to deal with a separate matter, which is the Crown's application for restraining orders against you in relation to the 4 complainants where the jury acquitted you. Those were counts 1 to 4 concerning Rosina Breen, Helen Thomas, Liz Green, and Stephanie Hurst. I will deliver a judgment on that application when I conclude my sentencing, and it will be available as an addition to the sentencing remarks I am now delivering. Yeah. The applications for restraining orders are not opposed by you, but I need to give my reasons for making them. So he didn't oppose this. He said, yeah, that's fine. My attention has been helpfully drawn by counsel to the intimidatory offences guideline. I have considered the general guideline on custodial sentences and the totality guideline as well as the material provisions of the Sentencing Act 2020. Given that there were separate crimes against separate victims which I consider need to be each marked with distinct sentences, I propose to pass sentences which will be served consecutively rather than concurrently. I am aware that certain of the facts overlap, but consider nevertheless that this is a case for consecutive sentences given the particular forms your harassment of the different victims took. So, oftentimes sentences will run concurrently, so next to each other, because if these things happened at the same time, you'll be sentenced for the same amount of time and other reasons. But they're saying even though there is overlap here, you're going to get punished for each one of these things individually, one after the other after the other.
It seems to indicate that he made slightly different approaches.
Okay.
So then that would tend to indicate that perhaps they are justified in applying these sentences consecutively.
So here we go. Your offences are so serious that only a custodial sentence can be justified. But because I am sentencing you for more than one offence, I must ensure that, standing back, the total overall sentence reflects all of your offending behaviour in a just and proportionate manner. That is the principle of totality to which I will make reference in my remarks, and which you have heard counsel discussing with me. I will apply that principle by adjusting each individual consecutive sentence. I have received very helpful oral and written submissions from Mr. McGuinness Casey and Mr. Rowcliffe from the Crown, and Mr. Aubrey Casey for you. Mr. Aubrey Casey represented your mitigation in a measured and realistic manner, recognising that the custody threshold has been crossed. I am grateful to him and to Mr. McGuinness Casey and Mr. Rowcliffe for the substantial assistance they provided me throughout the trial. So it seems like Mr. Belfield's own barrister said the custody threshold has been crossed here.
Well, he would have discussed that with Alex, so it seems to me that Alex has admitted effectively that he's going to jail.
I have had regard to the moving victim personal statements which have been submitted to the court. I empathise, however, that the issue of the appropriate sentences is for me and not for your victims to decide, applying the relevant guidelines and the law. A very helpful and detailed pre-sentence report is before me. That report shows that you have finally acknowledged the distress caused to your victims, but highlights that you still appear to focus on the impact of events on you and feel in certain respects that you have been unjustly treated. So the judge
not shown remorse.
Yeah. I have read the several character references provided for you. I accept they speak in positive terms about you and commend your work in the community, because people need to understand Belfield goes to like dementia care homes and puts on shows and stuff like that all the time.
Yeah.
Mr. Aubrey Casey has reminded me of your successful career and online following and underlined your particular style and broadcasting persona. It is also clear that you come from a close family and that you have acted with real kindness in assisting those facing substantial challenges in their lives, particularly during the pandemic. It was also submitted that custody would have a profound effect on you and those dependent on you, including 9 employees. Wow. 9 employees at the Voice of Reason.
Well, 10 videos a day?
Yeah, that's true. He's going to press that.
That's true.
Where I state findings of fact in my sentencing remarks, I am satisfied of those facts on the evidence called before the jury to a standard which makes me sure of them. A different civil standard applies when I deal with the Crown's application for restraining orders. I will begin with some of the common features of the conduct on the basis of which you were convicted by the jury, and I will then turn to the specific victims. Count 15. The stalking you committed was not the conventional type which is popularised in the press. You did not meet or physically approach or watch any of your victims as a traditional stalker might have. Your methods were, however, just as effective as a way of intimidating your victims, and were in many ways much harder to deal with. Your stalking consisted of use of repeated email communications, social media content on Twitter, and creation and publication of YouTube videos on your channel, The Voice of Reason, in which you commented in highly negative and often abusive terms about the complainants. Now, I have a problem with that. And I'm going to pause you there. Because if it's talking about somebody and not a form of contact directed to the person, I don't feel that's stalking. That's just my opinion. But I think if you're talking about somebody, you are not harassing them. If you are talking to somebody, you are.
It depends if you're talking about the person or about the person's actions.
Okay.
I would say.
Okay.
It's like when we talk about the bastard son, right?
Yeah.
We're not talking about the person. We're talking about her actions as First Minister.
But I'm actually gonna I'm once again I'm gonna push back a little bit here, because I've seen some of his videos about these people, and he is talking about things that they have done, and that's why he's calling them out.
Yeah, that's fine. But is that all he does? See, the thing is, I mean, we all have access to his body of work, but
For
are
now,
you going to sit
until
through
they
it?
take it down.
Yeah, but are you going to sit through it and plan this out? Because I think if that's in there, it's likely that he's said personal things about them.
Okay, so he goes on to say here, and this is a count against Alex, I would say.
Yeah.
As you described in some of your videos, your aim was to haunt your victims. They gave graphic evidence that they believed you would be true to your word and would never go away. It was only the imposition of bail conditions restraining your actions which have given them peace in the period to trial. So if he's physically saying, I intend to haunt these people, that's an issue.
It is.
A number of witnesses said you had weaponized the internet. I find that to be a wholly apt description of your conduct, says the judge.
See, this is the part where I'd heard, and I cannot confirm nor deny this, I'd heard that he had set some of his followers on them, or his followers had taken up the challenge and, set themselves on them.
And something we will always do here at Chasing Dissent is, if we are talking about somebody in a derogatory term, we will say, please never, never go and harass those people. Never.
No, we've never asked anyone to do anything for us because we're big boys and we're quite capable of holding our own.
I mean, we have asked people to subscribe on patreon.com/Chasing Dissent. Or
yeah, okay.
You can do so in the links in the chat right now if you'd like. But anyway.
And if you actually subscribe to Ko-fi online now, apparently it'll appear in the chat.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Okay.
It's supposed to, and then once I give you the link, it'll appear on the stream.
Okay. Anyway. The emails were very widely distributed and not simply sent to the direct victims. When the victim sought to block your emails, the common device you used was to use a different email address to get through to them. The tactic was used by you on many occasions. In some instances, you used the technique of identifying the personal home addresses of individuals in your communications, which understandably caused them to fear for their safety. Their feelings of, in effect, being followed or monitored were justified. So he would send them emails, allegedly here, with their own addresses in.
And he would obviously use personal emails that they didn't use for business use.
And also, as somebody who has had my address sent out, I understand how they felt. I'm trying to sit on the fence here.
Yeah, okay, Alex. Sorry, Ben.
The YouTube videos and tweets reached your very substantial audience. The effect of these communications was to encourage the readers and viewers to form highly negative views of the complainants, often based on wholly false allegations by you. That part I'd need some clarity on.
The judge has already said that the facts that he is stating here, he is satisfied that they are the truth.
Okay. Those readers and viewers then join the abuse of the complainants in a way which is sadly now a familiar feature of social media interaction, otherwise also known as social media dogpiling.
Yeah.
Yeah. Online stalkers like you have the ability to recruit an army of followers whose conduct massively expands the effect of your stalking. That is why I say your stalking, in many respects, more serious than a conventional stalker. These are the bits that I'm getting worried about.
Well, these are the bits that I say that people like that Mutton chap and the 77th, they should be really worried about these parts.
Yeah, but they are actively directing pylons, and they're they're people that are part of who release my address online. But what I feel like the judge is saying here, and once again this is just my opinion, is that if you have a large audience and your audience go and do that thing, even if you've not told them to, then it's your fault. That's what it looks like.
Well, see that I don't think I don't read that from that.
See, I do. and that's
well. See, this is where we differ because you've excuse me, you've seen Belfield, right? And he does go off in one, and he does crack up, and he does wind people up, and he rips. I mean, he does more than rip the piss out of them. You know, he's actually abusive to them on regular YouTube. I don't know. I sometimes didn't know how he managed to get away with it and still stay on air. Right. Now, we don't do that.
No.
Right. Okay. And the thing is, you could never say we did. So if anyone went off and picked on someone that we had commented on, say we commented on Fauci, right?
Yeah.
And showed you him making one statement and then making another statement that was totally contradictory. What would you take from that if someone went off and had a go at Fauci? Because that's not up to us. That's not our fault.
No.
And I think we could quite successfully defend that.
Yeah, I'm just worried that, like I said at the beginning, I'm just worried that this opens the door for that argument to be made, and it's something that's in the back of my mind, right?
Well, I know it is, but I think you're overthinking it, right? I think you've got to go quite a bit out your way to get to the stage that Alex has got to, and I think he maybe hasn't been quite as explicit to his audience and to the general public as to what he actually did than what's actually come out.
I think you're right.
Coming out.
I do think you're right. And it's like I said, it seems like he purposely muddled what the solicitors were for example.
Yeah.
So the judge continues, I accept that in certain limited respects, you were acting as a form of media commentator in stating views on matters of public interest when you made some of your communications. However, even accepting the latitude our law gives to those exercising free speech rights, on the jury's verdicts, you exceeded the generous margins. You made communications which had serious impacts on the private lives of the complainants with distressing effects on their mental and physical health. I find that the motivating factor in your communications about these complainants was not the exercise of journalistic freedom to comment on matters of public interest, but personal grudges and responses to real or apparent slights. I am not...
And that I can believe, actually.
Yeah, but he made that very clear quite often, that these people, a lot of this whole case appears to have been about an email that was sent out about him, an email that was false.
Yeah.
That he never let go.
Yeah, well, yes, and there are ways and means of pursuing these things without doing the same thing that they'd done to you.
Yeah. I am not imposing sentences on you because you made comments about the BBC or about matters of public interest. Your sentences reflect your repeated and personal harassment of the victims and not your views on any issue of public interest. You are entitled to hold and express views, but you are not entitled to destroy the personal lives of your victims through online harassment. I now turn to the specific counts. I have taken into account all of the oral and written evidence at trial, but in the interest of brevity will only summarise the nature of your conduct towards each victim at a high level in order to explain my sentences and application of the guidelines. Here we go. These are the individual ones. Count 4, Bernard Spedding, Bernie Keefe. Turning first to count 4 concerning Bernie Keefe, he is a highly respected and established presenter of many years standing at BBC Radio Northampton. Your harassment of him took place over a substantial period of time. These were the 9 years between 2011 and 2020. It was only at the very end of this period that the harassment overlapped to some extent with that of other complainants. So this is a 9-year campaign, apparently.
Christ, that's longer than Ukraine's been bombing Donetsk.
I'm trying to do this professionally, and this is what I get. This is what I get.
I think I only state facts.
Yeah, that's true.
That's true.
Having once been a friend and acquaintance, your campaign of harassment against Mr. Keefe first took the form of many emails which sought to criticise any aspect of his shows and then moved into highly offensive material. He did his best to ignore your communications and he asked you in polite and restrained terms to stop. You did not. There were many communications and not all were produced in court. They appear to have become less frequent around 2018, but your communications escalated substantially from 1st of October 2019 when you suspected that Mr. Keith had communicated by email with a person he did not know, Mr. Hewis, to warn him of your past behaviour and to inform him of what he believed you had done to other BBC employees. Mr. Hewis then published part of that email from Mr. Keith in a tweet. You then bombarded Mr. Keith with Facebook messages, emails, and made highly abusive YouTube videos about him, including false allegations that he had mental health issues. Even when he instructed lawyers for you to communicate with, and they requested you not contact Mr. Keith, you continued to send repeated abusive communications directly to Mr. Keith. He had no escape from you. There was no purpose in communicating directly other than continuing your campaign of harassment. He was asked to stop. And that is the threshold for harassment. If you are contacting somebody directly, repeatedly, and they ask you to stop, at that point, it crosses over the threshold. And so, once again, we have to be objective. We have to sit on the fence. He's done something wrong here. He has.
Yeah.
Mr. Keith gave the jury graphic and distressing evidence of how close he came to hanging himself. He was seconds away from taking his life as a result of your conduct. You made this highly successful and confident radio presenter lose all joy in life and turned him into a shell. Mr. Keith also felt a serious physical risk of attack, although at no point did you commit any physical acts against him. Mr. Keith gave evidence which I accept of heightened awareness of individuals, additional security measures, and said he gave his fellow villagers copies of your photograph. He was terrified of you. Now, these are things that Mr. Keith said. We don't know how true they are. He could have been hamming it up, right? We have to play devil's advocate. Could have been hamming it up.
Yes, okay, he could have been, but look back to yourself. What have you done as a result of stuff that's occurred to you?
I've purchased security.
Yeah.
I fully understand. I do.
I think, to be fair, it's judging by what's been said there, it was a lot less that was given to you than it looks like Alex has. Has put on Mr. Keith.
So the group of people that are harassing me had been doing it for a year before I took action, and this looks like, it's alleged that this is a 9-year campaign, right? And
yeah, that's quite disturbing, actually.
Yeah, so I do understand both sides here. I do.
Yeah. Okay, carry on.
I find that Count 5 falls within Category A1 of the relevant stalking guideline. That is the most serious category. As to culpability, the history I have summarised demonstrates that your actions were conducted over a sustained period of time, and I find were intended to maximise Mr. Keith's distress. Your actions were of an extreme nature and pushed this matter clearly into the top of the culpability range. As to harm, I have identified very significant distress was caused to Mr. Keith. So that's the judgment of Mr. Saini. I need to identify the starting point for your sentence. Your stalking of Mr. Keith, as charged on the indictment, began before 3rd of April 2017, the date when the maximum penalty was increased from 5 years to 10 years. The guideline reflects this higher penalty. It is common ground that the maximum penalty for this count is 5 years imprisonment. Okay, so because he started his campaign before...
the maximum was 5 years for that.
If your offending had been post 3rd of April 2017, the starting point under the guidelines for this form of stalking would have been 5 years. Both the Crown and your counsel submitted, and I accept, that I should move down from the starting point to take into account the lower early statutory maximum of 5 years imprisonment. I will take a starting point of 2 years and 6 months.
I have to go and get my dinner.
Okay.
It has been delivered.
Okay. How long are you... Okay. I'll see you in a sec. I will keep going. I then need to consider aggravating and mitigating factors. There are the following 2 matters which I have not already taken into account in my categorization. They justify upward movement from the starting point. First, the fact that your postings publicly about Mr. Keith resulted in followers of your social media profiles abusing him over a lengthy period, and this is one of the things I have a problem with. As I've already said. If he's not directing people at him, I don't think he's responsible for their actions. I don't think that if I make a video about something or someone or something someone has done, and then people off their own back go and say, look, you did this, you're an arse, for example, how is that my fault? Especially if And I don't know if Alex did, but we would always say, don't go and harass this person, don't bring them up on it. But this is where I have a problem. In some cases, this is extended to death threats. Second, the false and scandalous accusation that Mr. Keith had regularly had sex in public on gay beaches with strangers for 2 decades, coupled with the threat to include the allegation in a story which you would sell for publication. Well, if he did that, that's pretty sick. The mitigation is lack of previous convictions and previous good character. There has also been some remorse expressed, as recorded in the pre-sentence report. I make allowance for these matters, and I also have regard to the principle of totality in making an adjustment to my sentence. Having regard all these matters, I impose a sentence of 2 years, 6 months in respect to count 5 concerning Mr. Keith. So that's your first 2.5 years there. Count 6. Ben Hewis. As to count 6 concerning Mr. Hewis, he's a videographer who works in the theatre and wedding industry. You did not know him and have in fact never met him. His problems began when he went online in late 2019 to support those in the theatre who he believed were being unfairly attacked by you on Twitter. Your stalking of him took place between the end of 2019 and went into mid-2020. When the police became involved, your attacks on Mr. Hewis took the form of both personal emails as well as highly distressing YouTube videos. Citation, please. You felt that Mr. Hewis had libelled you by a post on Twitter which included part of the private email Mr. Keith had sent Mr. Hewis on 1st of October 2019. I have already referred to that email. I'm sure Mr. Hewis will regret for the rest of his life that he included that email in his tweet. John's back. That is because it led you to direct a flood of abuse towards him despite a rapid apology and retraction from him. You claimed in multiple communications to have hired and paid lawyers to sue Mr. Hewis. Those statements were false. So he said that he's hired lawyers to sue him. Hewis has apologised, and it appears to have continued. This was intimidatory behaviour towards a man who felt his family and home were at risk. I find you had no intention of taking legal action, but decided to use online threats as a way to obtain details of who had supplied Mr. Hewis with the information about you, which he published in his tweet. Information that was false. Okay? So Belfield did have a right to be really, really angry about that. So
You told me this would only take 20 minutes. We've now been on for what? Over half an hour.
Let's keep going.
I want to have my dinner.
Have your dinner. I'll keep going.
Right, okay.
Mr. Hewis gave compelling evidence as to the distress he suffered and wished to keep his pregnant wife out of the dispute. The statutory maximum for this offence is 10 years. I find that this stalking was category B1 within the guidelines. As to culpability, I find your actions were intended to maximise distress to Mr. Hewis and took place over a sustained period, albeit a period shorter than that in the case of Mr. Keith. As to harm, it is clear that the serious distress was caused to Mr. Hewis and he has had to seek professional help as a result of your offending. I think Mr. Hewis has kind of hammed it up a bit. I really do. Belfield had a right to be pissed off at him. Belfield had a right to threaten to sue him, I would say, because he published false and defamatory information about him. But the second Mr. Hewis retracted and apologised, that should have been the end of it. Anything beyond that, I don't know. The category B1 starting point is 2 years, 6 months imprisonment with a range of 1 to 4 years. As to aggravating factors justifying upward adjustment, there are 4 factors increasing seriousness which I have not already taken into account in my categorization. First, you involved Mr. Hewis' family by using your videos pictures of his wife and young child. You attached an image of a fetal scan to an email and attempted to contact his wife. Secondly, you contacted Mr. Hewis' clients intending to undermine his business. Thirdly, you encouraged your followers to contact him, and your posting publicly about Mr. Hewis resulted in followers of your social media profiles abusing Mr. Harris. Hewis, sorry. You should scrub that out. Fourthly, Google searches continue to reference articles about Mr. Hewis which remain available on your websites, thereby not only perpetuating the distress but also the financial effects on Mr. Hewis. These matters justify upward movement from the starting point. As to a downward adjustment, The mitigation is lack of previous convictions, good character, and remorse in the form I have stated. These matters justify some limited downward movement, and I will also need to adjust the sentence to take into account the principle of totality. Having regard to all these matters, in respect to count 5 concerning Mr. Hewitt, I impose a sentence of 2 years, 6 months imprisonment to run consecutively on the sentence of count 5. So, despite the fact there was some overlap between the two, you're getting them one after the other. Let's move on. Count 7, Philip Dehaney. As to count 7 concerning Mr. Haney, actually, I'm going to rename this video Part 1, John.
Yeah, let's do that. We've got another show to do tonight.
We do. So tomorrow, I will come back and I will continue this with you all. So, my apologies, but we are looking at time and we've got another show to prepare for. So, we've given you half of the convictions and we'll give you the other half tomorrow. So, on that note, I want to thank you all for joining us.
Thank you.
And we will see you back here tonight at 9 PM for the main show. And at some point tomorrow, we will finish this off as well. So thank you for doing that and popping up to this pop-up show, looking at this judgment. We will be back tomorrow. Thank you very much, John.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Time for this evening, so it's good night from me, and it's good night from him. Good night. Good night.
Good night, everyone.
Good night, Mama. Good night, Daddy.
Stop playing with my bust!
Good night, everybody.
Good night, children. Good night, Daddy.
You're a what?
A pianist!
Mwah! Good night, everybody.
You have been a delightful audience to talk. Good night. Thank you.
Oh, my bottom hurts. Good night, everybody.
Good night, Elizabeth.
Good night, John Boy. Good night, Jim Bob.
Oh, I did love that hamster so. I took it into bed with me every night, you know.
Good night, everybody.
I think, ladies and gentlemen, I think I have to go now. I've been standing here for a very long time. I think the end of the show must have come and gone.
There you go. That's our solar system. You forgot Uranus. Good night, everybody.
Thank you for listening. You've been very nice to work to.
Good night, Jim Bob.
Good night, Jim Bob.